Well, hello and good evening. Hope you guys are doing well. That song just cut right off, didn't it? I tried to time it so that it would end and switch over right at the end of the song, but I must have miscalculated that. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing great. Welcome to another episode of Tom Talk Live. I appreciate you guys taking some time to stop by, say hello, and join me. Have a special one tonight that I'm looking forward to and been working on to put together for you, and I hope you find some value in it. But I'm going to take a moment just to kind of chat with you for a little bit and kind of get things going here in just a minute, give people an opportunity to show up. But we're very thankful. This last week has been pretty crazy. I talked about it on my last live stream. I think I did Friday night, where we've just been dealing with a lot of storms here in the Mid South. And I feel like it's just kind of lasted for a long time, and I think we're all pretty sick of it. We're ready for it to be done. And it seems like this storm system's finally moving out of here. We still had some rain today, but that's really all it's been since yesterday. And don't get me wrong, I'm very thankful that the tornado weather is done, but even the rain, there's just been a ton of flooding. We talked about it at church this morning, comparing how much rainwater people had measured at their houses. It was quite a bit, and we're seeing footage of people, property damage, roads that are flooded out, bridges that are destroyed, stuff like that. So do be careful if you are in this area. But we are very thankful that hopefully this is over with, and we'll be able to kind of move into some nicer weather. I'm ready for some sunshine, get an opportunity to put my drones up in the air and fly around a little bit. So hopefully we'll have that in store for us here pretty soon. But let me know how you are in your part of the world, wherever you're at. If you are close to me, if you're far, I would love to hear from you. And just let me know how things are going in your corner of the world. So for this evening, what I have planned for us is to talk about the stories that we tell ourselves. Stories have the ability of being so powerful, right? And stories are something that we love to tell. Think about when you go on a trip or if something exciting happens, it's the story that you're always looking forward to telling someone else, right? You don't get back from a vacation and say, just kind of list off your agenda. And it was like at 8 o'clock, we got up and had breakfast. At 9 o'clock, we went down to the pool. You don't talk about that. You talk about the things that happened, right? The stories. And stories have so much power to them, don't they? I remember when I was young, I think I was in sixth grade, so just starting into middle school, just starting to feel, like a little more mature, not a little kid anymore. And I remember one day they took our whole class to the library. And so they brought us all in there, and the librarian was there, and she had picked out a book that she was going to read to us. And I remember immediately thinking, like, this still feels like little kid stuff, right? Like this is elementary school stuff. We're middle schoolers now, right? You should treat us like, more mature, right? Not reading to us. And then what made it even worse is she showed us the book that she had chosen to read to us. And it was a book called Shiloh. So it had a cover, the little dog on it. And I'm like, oh man, really? Like, we don't even get like a cool story about something, that's like going to be fun and action packed and all that kind of stuff. That's what I was looking forward to. And no, not a story about a dog. So going into it, I had just kind of a negative, kind of attitude towards it and felt like it was just not going to be something I was interested in at all. And so she starts reading this story. And before I knew it, before I realized it, and I don't know exactly at what point this happened, but very subtly, I got pulled into this story, right? The story about this dog and this little boy who finds this dog. He rescues it because it was a dog that had been abused. I don't know if you've ever read the story Shiloh before, but it's about a beagle. So now it's close to my heart because now I have a beagle named Lucy. So it's kind of always been a story that now I kind of think back on fondly. But before I realized it, by the end of that class period, I wanted to hear more, right? The class period ended, story time had to stop, but I was waiting for more. I wanted to hear more because I was so hooked and engrossed in this story because that's the power that stories have, right? They have a power to really capture our attention. And so when we think about the stories that we tell ourselves, we have to realize the power that they have, right? They have a power over us. And so it's important for us to have a better understanding of those stories. So here's what we're going to look at for this evening, right? These are the three things we're going to go over. So we're going to talk about why the stories we tell ourselves matter. And I've kind of touched on that a little bit. Then we're going to go into how they impact our mindset and decisions, right? So the mindset we have and the decisions that we make. And then third, how to identify and rewrite those stories that no longer serve us, right? So first, kind of understanding why stories are important, and then seeing how they have an impact on us, and then identifying them and really kind of evaluating them to see, is this something that's actually helping me, or is this something that's holding me back? Because a lot of times it's these stories we tell ourselves that end up holding us back. And so stay with me. We're going to go through all three of these. Make sure I'm good here, right? All right. So let's start off with understanding the power that stories have, right? And so these stories that we tell ourselves, these come from all sorts of places, right? Stories that we tell ourselves come from our childhood. They come from our community, our society that we live in, maybe experiences that we've had. So sometimes these things are external, right? Stories that we get from external sources, people that have told us these things about ourselves. And then sometimes it's internal, right? It's a story that we've told ourselves. It's this narrative that we've created and come up with that we keep telling ourselves. And sometimes these are good and sometimes they're bad. And it's important for us to be able to recognize them, first of all, and then being able to evaluate them to see, is this something that I'm benefiting from? Is this a story I want to tell myself, right? Or is this something that I need to rewrite? Is this something that I need to look at again? So, what are some common stories, right? What are some common things that come up? So, I want you to think to yourself, right? What's a story that I tell myself? And we're going to kind of focus on the bad ones that we need to change, right? The negative stories that we need to look at to reevaluate, because those are the ones that are holding us back. So, some of these stories, it might be things like, I always mess things up, right? So, when something goes wrong, that's kind of the story we tell ourselves, like, oh, I never can get it right. I always mess this up. Um, Maybe a story like, I'm never good enough. Maybe a story like, I'm just not that type of person that can do this thing, right? Whatever that thing is. So we tell ourselves that, right? That's a story that we're telling ourselves. I remember, for example, when I used to teach adult education, I would get adults that would come in trying to get their diploma. And a story that I heard very often was, I can't do math, right? I can't do math. That was a story that they were telling themselves. So before they even sat down at the desk, before I even gave them a math book or even started to show them anything about how to do these math problems, they already had that story in their mind, right? They were already telling themselves, I can't do math. And so think of the barrier that was already creating for them before we even got started. So right out of the gate, they're already telling themselves, I can't do this. And that has a real effect on us, right? The stories that we tell ourselves have a real impact on our ability to move forward, to be able to do the things that we want to do and that we need to do. And so, are we identifying what these stories are? So, think to yourself, what's one phrase that keeps coming up? What's one story you keep telling yourself? And think specifically during the times that something doesn't go right. Maybe you fail at something. Maybe something doesn't go how you wanted it to go. You mess something up. And in some of those negative situations, those negative circumstances where you're frustrated, you're upset, what is the story that comes up, right? What is it you tell yourself in those moments? I want you to think about that, right? Maybe write that down somewhere. You don't have to share it in the chat. I know this can be a more vulnerable thing, but I want you to try to put that down somewhere. Maybe make a little note in your phone. But what are those stories? What are those things that tend to pop up when things aren't going right? What are these stories that you're telling yourself? So once we kind of get a better idea, we need to really understand how to evaluate them, right? Because I think the problem comes when we don't really realize that we're not evaluating these stories to see, first of all, is this even true, right? Is this reality at all? Is this based in any evidence for this? And then secondly, is this helping me, right? Is this actually helping me to grow? And so I want us to challenge these questions, right? So once we start to identify what these stories are, again, in moments of failure, in moments of when we're being challenged, right? Those challenging times that we go through, think about and identify what are those stories that are coming up for you. And then ask the question, where did this story originate, right? Where did it come from? Did I come up with this? Did somebody tell me this? Does it go back to my childhood, family, school? Is it the culture around me that's telling me this, right? Where is this story coming from? Maybe it's something internal. Maybe it's just something that we created because we've experienced something a couple times. And so we just write it off that this is just the truth about us, right? This is just the reality. Like this is something that's can never change, right? This is just how we are. And so we create that story, that narrative about ourselves. And then the final question, yeah, is this helping me grow or is it keeping me small? Is this story holding me back or is it propelling me forward? Is it encouraging me or is it discouraging and demotivating and depowering? Right? These are the questions we need to ask of these stories that we have in our own minds. And I also want us to notice that we have this tendency to find the evidence that fits our story, right? So if you have this story you've created for yourself, right? Like I can't do math. We use that one as an example. I can't do math. So anytime that student would mess up a math problem, right, or not do well on a math test, guess what? That was evidence that they can't do math, right? And so they would just find the things that would feed into that story. Never mind that they actually did do good on this other math quiz that they did, or they were able to do this math problem and that math problem. They did understand this part of it, right? We have a tendency to kind of downplay or ignore the evidence that's contrary to the story that we have created for ourselves and only pull in those pieces of evidence that actually do support this story that we've created. And so that's something to keep in mind, right? Are we really being objective about it and looking at the reality of the situation and realizing that it's not always like this, right? And in that way we can kind of start to question the story. And then the next part is really learning how to rewrite it. So let me share with you. I want to get a little vulnerable with you and share just kind of, obviously we all have, I think, several stories, right? This is something that's kind of ongoing in different areas of our lives and through our lives. We have these different stories that come up. But one that's kind of been pervasive for me and that has come up and that I'm working on, right? And still working to kind of rewrite this story for myself is this idea of not being worthy, right? Not being good enough. Feeling like, and especially like in my relationships and my friendships, am I good enough? Feeling like I'm not good enough. And so that's the story I've told myself, that I'm not good enough and so I need to provide value for others in order for them to like me, in order for them to want me, right? And so that's tough on me, right? Because that creates this kind of dynamic that's not healthy for me, where I feel like I have to do and do and do just in order to feel worthy, and that I need others to like me to give me that validation. So that's not a healthy story to tell myself. That's holding me back in so many different ways and is unhealthy in so many different ways. So how do we start to rewrite those stories, right? Once we've kind of identified them, once we've evaluated them, how do we start to change that narrative? And changing that narrative, changing that story starts to like rewire our brains, right? Starts to rewire the way we think. It starts to change how we understand who we are, our identity. and it will change the outcome, right? It will change the outcome of our lives, the things that we decide to pursue. And if we give up or we continue to push through, it all comes back to changing the narrative, changing the story into something that will motivate us to keep going instead of holding us back. So, how do we rewrite those stories? So, maybe one of the old stories that we've told ourselves is, I'm terrible at relationships. I'm just terrible at them. That's a story we're telling ourselves. So, how do we rewrite that? What would the new story be? Maybe the new story is, I'm learning to build healthier, more intentional relationships, right? I'm learning to do this better. So, that doesn't create a false story that I'm great at relationships, right? Because that would not be true necessarily. We don't necessarily want to create a false story, but it can be changed with a positive outlook, right? So maybe I've had relationships in the past that weren't great. Maybe I've struggled in that area of my life. But that doesn't mean the story is I'm terrible at relationships, right? Where I've made it my identity. That's the story I'm telling me, like that's just how it's going to be forever. Instead, I'm learning how to build healthier, more intentional relationships. That's a story that will propel us forward. That is a story that will help us to grow and give us hope for the future, right? So that change and the way that we're talking to ourselves and the way that we're kind of creating this narrative will really change the outcome of our lives. So for me, going back to my story, right, feeling not worthy, so I have to provide additional value for people, needing others to like me, to give me that validation. How do I need to change that? What does that story need to be changed to? It needs to be changed to I am enough, right? I am good enough. I have value. I have value that I can provide for others, and I don't need to provide additional value, right? I am enough in myself. And I don't even need others to like me to like myself. I don't need external validation, right? I have that within myself that I am good enough, and I can tell myself that. And what a difference that will make when I really start to hold that dear, when I really start to understand that better about myself and live in that, right? And that's something that I'm working on, right? I understand what the story needs to be, and it's something we have to kind of continually tell ourselves because the old story tends to find a way back into our minds, right? It keeps kind of popping up. If it's really been something that's there, kind of deeply ingrained, it's not going to just disappear overnight. It's not going to be something that you're like, oh, yeah, that's not true, and then just wipe it away and it's gone. It'll keep finding a way in. So you have to keep kind of combating that with the news story, with rewriting it to say, no, I recognize that story. That's not true. That is not the true story. Here is the true story. And remind yourself of it. So think for a minute, how can you rewrite your story? What's one thing that you've been telling yourself that you need to stop and really analyze it and consider, is this helping me grow or is this keeping me small? And how do I rewrite this story? What's the new story that I need to tell myself? A story that will empower me, a story that will encourage me, a story that will push me forward in my life. That's the kind of story that we need to tell ourselves. And it's totally up to us to do that, right? Nobody else can tell you that story. Remember, it's the stories we tell ourselves that are so powerful. And the thing is, and here's the really crazy thing. Even if you have people around you that love you and care about you and are constantly encouraging you, constantly telling you positive things about yourself, I hope you do. But the thing is, if you're telling yourself a negative story, who are you going to listen to most of all? You're going to listen to yourself. You're going to listen to that internal dialogue before you listen to anybody else. Even if what they're saying is contrary to that, you have to be willing to change the narrative yourself. No one else can do that for you. So until you're ready to change that, it's not going to change, right? It doesn't matter how much others encourage you, how much positive feedback you get, how much people say, no, it's not like that. It's like this. Until you're willing to change that story, then it'll never change. So keep telling yourself the stories that are going to set you free. Don't get stuck in those same old stories that hold you back. If you're interested in reaching out to me, I'm going to be doing more workshops around this concept. And I even provide one on one coaching if that's something you want to go deeper with to really dive into what these stories are. And I would really love to have a conversation with you about that if you're interested. And talk not so much about the stories that are holding you back, but what the story could be. Imagine for a moment what the story for your life could be. If it was just the most amazing, wonderful story ever, what would that story be? Thank you for joining me tonight. I really appreciate your time. I hope you got some value from this, and feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in any of the things that I talked about this evening. You guys have a good night.